It was never about Erica. It was never about
in whatever way possible, we need Christian leaders who have a good understanding of the Bible, to have a good understanding of what's going on in our nation as well, and then be able to communicate that effectively to the youth at the same time.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Jacob York Show. I'm excited to have you guys with us tonight. It is going to be a very, very interesting episode. This is part 2 of our Save America debate series. We have some very special guests with us. But before we get to the meat of our show tonight, make sure you guys go to faithstrength.square.site to get the Jacob York Show shirts and sweatshirts, but also Christian apparel and patriotic apparel as well. Some great clothing comes out of that brand, and we're excited to partner with them. So yes, please go visit that site before we get going, and then make sure you press play, because we have some fun guests tonight. But we're not going to waste any time getting into our segment tonight. We have some fun guests, and I'm going to welcome Mr. Jaden Heard to the show. And Jaden is a social media coordinator for TPUSA Communities, and then also a great public speaker. And I will say, one of the first messages I had with Jaden was talking about one of his street debates. You guys need to go look him up and watch a couple, because they are pretty entertaining. The one that I texted him about initially was this guy came up, made this claim, and then Jaden was like, yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about. So make sure you go check that out. But yeah, Jaden, the floor is yours. I'm glad you're on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I'm just going to be making the claim that abortion should be criminalized from the moment of conception. I do give zero exceptions to this. I do believe whoever is responsible for the abortion should be held accountable legally, whether that's jail time or even possibly the death penalty. I do not believe that the child in the womb is some clump of cells. I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that humans have inherent worth off of the fact that they're made in the image of God. They have a soul, and that God uniquely made them. Therefore, you cannot unalive, or speaking of TikTok terms, I'm sorry, you cannot kill innocent human being under any circumstance, which would include abortion. And so, yeah, it's very simple. I think the Republican Party should adopt this view. I think it's the only consistent view. And I think it's the view that will hold this country in right standing with God. The Bible says that God turns his face away from nations who practice child sacrifice. If we want God to bless this nation, we need to abolish this practice of child sacrifice. So I'll yield my time.
All right. Looks like the first person who's going to debate you or question you is none other than Tyler Schappaugh. Tyler, take it away.
Okay, so first off, totally agree. Great pitch with the whole thing. How would you see implementation of this in federal law? I know there's kind of maybe, at least when I've talked to people about this, there's 2 avenues you could go. You could go federal statute, which is a little more, I don't know, dicey, could get overturned by courts, or federal constitutional amendment. Where would you kind of stand in seeing that go forth?
Yeah, federal Constitution Amendment. I think the 14th Amendment is perfect in this case. I think the term person in the 14th Amendment should apply to the preborn. Once you apply that to the preborn have the right to life, the right to, you cannot criminally prosecute them under any crime, or you cannot do any harm to them without due process. And so that would just apply to the preborn.
Okay.
So basically just apply what we already have to the preborn.
So you think the courts should adopt or rule that personhood in the 14th Amendment now refers to, a fetus at the point of conception?
Yeah. So right now they have it, if you're born or naturalized in this country, that applies to you. Naturalized is the language right there that's interesting to people, because if we agree that if life begins at conception, that means you're already naturalized. It's an interesting word there. I just think if you just simply apply the definition of preborn, then there's not much more to do, because then that would just automatically criminalize abortion in the same way that it criminalizes it for a born person. So if a homicide, if I homicided you, Tyler, that would be no different than me homiciding a baby in the womb.
Okay. All right. Yeah, totally agree.
All right. I'm going to bring Christian Maxwell on.
I actually agree fully with your stance. I think the thing that we would also have to contend with is that the medical community has started to rely so heavily upon the umbilical cord cells that are easy to be harvested from those later term abortions. And I think that we would have to then reckon with how do you decouple the health community and the new and emerging technologies that they're developing based off of the abortion industry. So that's a conversation that I think many people do not even know they need to have, and it's something that I think has gotten wildly out of control in the back end of this dialogue. Is that there's an entire new emerging field, and it's based solely off of the byproducts of killing unborn babies. So like I said, I fundamentally agree with you. I think that life begins at conception, and I do not think that abortion is something that we should be allowing, because if somebody did harm a woman and intentionally harmed her baby, we would be very outraged. So a woman shouldn't have the right to harm that same baby.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's funny that you bring up that thing with the late term abortion. After viability, you don't have to get an abortion to to preserve any sort of life of the mother or anything like that. You can get cesarean section. You can you can induce labor early, and there's another procedure too that I'm kind of blanking on at the moment. But it's funny to me how people will say, well, what about life of the mother? But even in your case, you brought up that case where doctors might be incentivized to even still justify abortion for that reason. That's just odd to me. It kind of reminds me of them using fetal cells for certain research and stuff like that too, from aborted babies. I think for vaccinations, it's very odd. And I don't want to live in a utopia where we have a bunch of medical, we have all these medical achievements, we have very low taxes, and look at our GDP, bro, and yet we're unaliving our kids. I'd rather live in a culture of life. And that's it. And those things can kind of flow from that. But yeah, that's my stance on it. But I'm glad you agree. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that one thing we have to also run like a nationwide information campaign about is that even when women get late term abortions, when they make the claim that it's for the life of the mother, she still has to deliver that child. So that child, she still has to have her cervix dilated to the point of allowing that child to pass through it. So that means that you are still going through the same delivery that could have produced a live child, as opposed to I'm going to say unalive, but killing that child and then still having to deliver it. So it really it's not rooted in any type of logic at all. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to ask a totally unrelated question in some sense, but it is still related. So I totally agree with you. But my question more for you is, why do you think that this is a somewhat, I would say, unpopular opinion within the first Republican Party, but then also everybody else at the same time?
Well, Republicans, and let's face it, they're cowards. I'm not out here to be a doomer. I'm not out here to be I'm not black-pilled or anything. I'm not saying you shouldn't vote. But the reality is that it's an unpopular issue. Therefore, they don't want to platform it like they should. What's popular right now is immigration. What's popular right now is the trans issue. I think that's a very good winning issue for Republicans, and that's why they focus on things like that. But they're not going to focus on abortion because most of the country, unfortunately, disagrees with this position. But the reason why they disagree with this position is not because of some sort of odd idea that they want to unalive a bunch of children. People are generally just misinformed on this issue, which is unfortunate. This is what Christian said. There needs to be an information campaign put out there. And I believe that can happen through the law. If you make the law say what it says, this is a baby at conception, it is killing it, and by killing it, you are committing homicide. The law is a tutor. It's the same thing that happened in slavery. Most people agreed that slavery was at least okay. You at least tolerated it because of the justification that they used at the time. But once the law changed, then it started to tutor people and teach people that, hey, this is actually wrong. These are image bearers of God, and they do not deserve to be treated this way. In the same way, if the law stated that abortion is murder and that doing this will get you punished by law, then you're teaching people that this is actually not okay, especially with the next generation growing up. They're going to be like, oh, wait, isn't that illegal? Oh, wait, that's wrong. Whereas right now we have a culture, abortion's been legal for so long in this culture that people are now mostly pro-choice. When I guarantee you back in the 70s, back in the 60s, most people probably would have identified as pro-life.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really interesting part about the generational battle that you're fighting here. But also along with that, do you think a lot of it, because I've seen this a lot in a lot of different races and talking to different candidates for things, a lot of Republicans, at least people on the right side of the aisle, will say like, oh yeah, I'm pro-life, but nothing's going to be done about it. And I think a lot of times it's because they're worried that they're going to lose votes because they are ashamedly pro-life, which is a problem.
Jesus says, what good is it to gain the whole world yet lose your soul? What good is it to win the party votes and yet you're responsible for, and I'm not even exaggerating, 2,000 babies being killed every single day, right, in this country? What more issue is there? Like let's just say hypothetically, there was genuinely 2,000 born people being killed from a procedure, right? And you're running for office and you have the power to overturn this, right? I don't care how unpopular that is. We would all probably agree that it's probably worth at least losing your seat or possibly losing like maybe popularity, right? What good is it to be popular, right? And then people will bring the argument, well, don't you want people to win seats so that we can eventually ban it? We've been saying this for years and years and years. We've had majorities for multiple times, and yet they haven't done it. And so there does come a case where there's just no excuse. Even your constituents may even agree with you in a certain state. I remember in Florida, they were trying to pass a heartbeat bill, and Trump opposed this bill because he thought it was too radical. And the other side of the constitutional amendment they would have passed would have allowed abortion up till birth. And so now people are questioning, like, wait, Trump, what are you doing? And once he got so much blowback from his own base, he changed his mind and supported the heartbeat bill in Florida, which it's funny to me. It seems like people are just kind of going with the wind. And guess what? The wind will change if you pass the law. If you pass the law, the wind will change. And so anyway, that's all I'm saying. And look, what we've done so far hasn't worked. All this whole, we'll do the incremental little things and we'll give them a little snack. And no, this country is getting more and more pro-death as time goes on. So what we're doing right now is not working. And people are like, well, if you pass this abortion ban, people are gonna go into an uproar, and then the opposite will happen. Well, again, if you do as I said, which you amend that 14th Amendment to be to extend personhood to preborn, then first of all, they can't really do. It'd be really hard to do that. But second of all, again, it's going to teach people that murder is murder, right? And preborn people are people made in the image of God, and they should be protected.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, Logan, you can finish this off.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you on this, but I wanted to ask you, who do you think should be leading this movement primarily? Who do you think should lead the ban?
Oh, like lead, like as in like a politician or like a person, like anyone?
Like men or women primarily was my question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely. I would say men, actually. Personally, I know actually the pro-life movement currently is mostly led by women, actually. I mean, no comment, but I really like this guy named Seth Gruber. Seth Gruber, he is one of my biggest inspirations currently. And I think if we had a bunch of Seth Grubers leading this movement, bro, there'd be some crazy stuff happening, I think. No offense to any women that are leading this movement. I'm just mainly answering Logan's question here. Of course, we prefer men, and that's what men are. They're leaders, and according to scripture, even, I think that men are called to lead. So, not that women can't do it. It's just a preference. But yeah, I would say like Seth Gruber would be great.
Yeah, I asked because what got me really involved in politics was the pro-life movement. And I've noticed that a lot of women who are involved in the movement, God has gifted them with the ability to compassion with fellow women and compassion with people. But at a point, we can't have compassion with murder. We have to have compassion with the victims and stand for justice. And I love Seth Gruber. I've met him a few times now and know a lot of friends who work for him. So I just want to know your perspective, because I think it's why we're being held back in the pro-life movement, is because we don't have strong men standing on the lines. And it's nothing to the women. I think it's just that we don't have strong men going out there and saying we need justice for our children. We're more, time, and as long as you're not having to, spend half your income to afford gas, then you're okay with, children being murdered.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Logan. I pulled up a verse right here in Ephesians chapter 5, and it says that, therefore expose them. Where is it? 1 second. Let me word search it real quick. Hang on. Yeah, here it is. So Ephesians chapter 5, reading at verse 11, it says, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them, right? We're to expose darkness. And I do believe that men are called to expose darkness, and not only expose darkness, but give the reconciliation, almost give the opposite. We're to bring righteousness. And if we are to carry that righteousness into law, I think that should be led by men. Women, like you said, have a role. They have functions that men don't. And that's been the beautiful thing about the pro-life movement. They've been able to minister to so many women in ways that man probably can't. But for you to like push in a law and for you to change the entire culture, man, I need a David, right? I need a Elisha, right? Who's not only mocking his enemies, but utterly destroying them by God's grace, right? And that's what we need to be. We need to be a bunch of Davids. We need to be a bunch of we need to be who's the guy that tear down the high places in the Old Testament? I forgot. Anyone, you can raise your hand if you remember, but he tore down the high
Nehemiah?
places. No, not Nehemiah. There were kings before him and after him that kept the commandments of God, but they did not tear down the high places. I forgot who it was. I'm blanking on it right now.
I think I remember who you're talking about, though.
Yeah, I forgot who it was, but I think it was Josiah. It was Josiah. Yeah, King Josiah. He not only kept the commandments of the Lord. This is what the Lord spoke about him, but he also tore down the high places, and he did it all in the name of the Lord. And by the way, what was happening in these high places? Guess what? Child sacrifice. We need to be Josiah. We need to tear down these high places where they're practicing child sacrifice. That was what King Josiah did. I think it was Josiah. I hope it is. I hope I'm not hopefully butchering that. But that's what needs to happen. And once that happens, God will bless his nation again. But he won't do that until we do that.
That's really good. All right, 15 minutes is up. We're all going to vote. I think you're probably going to get fives all around. But I will start it off, and I'm giving you a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being strongly agree, 1 being completely disagree. I'm giving you a 5 because I think this is a problem in our country, because if you don't have the sanctity of life, which is actually, I'm going to talk about that later, sneak peek, then I think that you lose a lot of other things in your culture as well with that, because that is like one of the most important inalienable rights that you have, which is the right to life. So I give you a 5. Logan, what do you give? I'm on a scale of 1 to 5, and why?
I give it 5. I think you hit the nail on the head. We have a life issue in this country. We don't value life. I truly think it's from turning away from the gospel. People don't realize how important life is. We see that they've stopped even caring about the lives of living people. That's why people celebrate the murder of Charlie Kirk, because they don't care. They don't care about life, and they just care about themselves. They care about their life, but no one else's. And I think we need to penalize abortion. We cannot let this crime go unpunished. And when we let it go unpunished, the next generation will make it legal. The next generation will condone it, and the next generation will celebrate it.
That's really good. All right, Tyler, scale 1 to 5.
Give him a 5. I totally agree. I think we have been brought up in this culture of death, like you kind of talked about. And once you tolerate the death of innocent human beings in the womb, no other immorality and no other sin is really comparable, and then you can let any other lawlessness kind of run wild. So yeah, I think it totally needs to be banned.
All righty, Christian, scale 1 to 5. What do you think?
I give it a 5. I fundamentally believe that abortion is the cornerstone of why the Islamification of America could happen so swiftly. Islam is literally being birthed quicker than we can birth Christians. I also think that it has fundamentally broke the family unit and moved people away from the natural growth of a family, because they can design a family unit based on convenience. There's nothing that's ever going to be convenient about having children. And I'm a mother of 4, so I can speak to this. There's nothing convenient about children, and they're not designed to be convenient. They're humans who need to be reared and raised. So the idea that we can schedule a baby for a more convenient time is a fundamental breakdown in society. And I think we need to move away from that.
That's really good. All right, Dayne, last vote.
Didn't hear parts of his thing, but I would give it a 5 as well. I think that what we're seeing as a part of this new movement, at least on the left, is an erosion of what it means to be an American. And Jacob, you made a great point, is life, the sanctity of life. You know, that's the first thing our founders wrote in the Declaration of Independence. So I agree.
All right. So basically, guys, I have my calculator out and I'm going to average the scores, but I don't have to average it because everybody gave it a 5. So great job, Jaden. Love the topic. Yeah, really, really well said. A ton. All right, we're going to bring Christian Maxwell on for her claim. Very excited, guys. Christian Maxwell is a congressional candidate in Illinois District number 1. And if I do say so myself, also a social media rock star. So happy for you guys to get to listen to her tonight. Christian, take it away. Oh, your mic is muted. Your mic is muted.
Sorry. My claim is that the Republicans' decision to retreat from major cities across the U.S. is largely responsible for and heavily correlated to the neglect of major voting blocs, communities, and overall influence of the American agenda. And I can go ahead and give a little bit of clarity to this. I'm stating this as a candidate who is running in one of the most dynamic districts, I would say, in this state. And when I look at the overall infrastructure inside of the city portion of my district, people will think and quickly say, oh, it's because people are just voting Democratic. It is not just because of that. And that's an easy scapegoat for the deterioration that we see in this city, which is Chicago, and what I think is being mirrored across the United States. The real core of this is that Republicans have retreated. They retreated in droves. They moved away. They stopped fighting back, and they gave up the territory. And that is the truth of the situation. And I think is a party of accountability. Jaden spoke to cowardice. And I think that for many people, that is still rife throughout the party. And that is why when you see people who do not have a spirit of cowardice, I think that it ruffles even Republicans' feathers, because they feel that some fights should not be fought. But that is not a warrior's take on anything. And with our major cities, they are to be treasured. Giving up the territory to Islam and to abortion and to drug culture. The Democrats aren't just beating us, they're just picking up our waste and what we've left to the wayside. So I believe that Republicans gave away our cities, and that's largely why we are where we are today.
All right. I couldn't get my mic to unmute there. Okay. Love the pitch to start. I don't see any hands raised, so I'll go first and ask you a question. So when you have a city, and for, in this case, well, let's just use Chicago, there's so many people there. Why do you think it is that Republicans are so scared to go in and do some of the dirty work in order to clean up a situation like that, but also just make it better? And ultimately, when you have all those cities across America, that's a lot of people that have been affected.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it just comes down to right now we're multiple generations into the retreat. So the generation of Republicans that exist now in the suburbs or collar counties around major cities, they don't even remember when Republicans had a chance. So in my particular district, it's been a century since we had a Republican actually lead this district. And the stronghold that Democrats have here, it is very extensive when you're looking from the outside in. And because many Republicans don't even want to come and look from the inside. They can't even assess how strong the hold is on a district because they're not even talking to these voters. I think that a lot of Republicans are, even if they say they're not, they're watching the news. And I think a lot of them are becoming afraid of the cities. I think that there's so much fear of the city. I have people tell me all the time that they are not willing to come to events in the city, but we're supposed to be the party of the Second Amendment. Why are we, as the party of the Second Amendment, scared to go anywhere? To be honest, why are we not all concealed carrying? Why are we not all willing to go where we want and desire to go? I think that the way that we've just adapted to life out in the collar counties and decided that that's just where we have to live and we'll even move farther and farther out. I think that that's extremely problematic. And I also think people need to realize that if you're willing to give up ground to Democrats, you will for sure give it up to Islam. Like, you're not going to stand your ground against anything if you can't even stand your ground against Democratic rule inside of a city.
I think that what you're describing is being seen all throughout the Republican Party, because they are making these claims, and somebody even say this happened with immigration in our country, where they make this claim like, yes, we're gonna get mass deportations, yes, we're gonna go no new wars, yes, we're the party of safety and this and that and the other thing, but then they don't necessarily put their money where their mouth is all the time.
No, I think that things sound good when people say them out of their mouth. But in reality, being willing to do what needs to be done to actually put belt to butt for these situations, many people don't have it in them. And we just, as a party, we really do have to focus back on having grit and the tenacity to walk things through to completion. And we also have to be willing to have very unpopular opinions, because in the midst of that unpopular opinion, you will find your people. There is no such thing as gray. There is no neutral ground. There isn't. You have to either be white or black, and you have to decide where you stand on these core issues and what your approach is going to be to taking the cities back. The Democrats aren't going to give it to you. You have to go take it.
So I really like your point there. As somebody, I live in eastern, northeast Indiana, so I know of the area that we have, Lake County, that's in Chicagoland. Obviously, we just took the Bears from Chicago, and I wanted to know, how do we build that infrastructure? Where do we start? What are communities where, if there was a strong Republican there, we could win those areas?
So I would have to base it off of what I'm seeing, because the Republican, so when we talk about the Republican Party, there's multiple layers of the Republican Party. There's the state party, there's the county level, and then there's the body of the GOP. So the body of the GOP is willing to go and take cities. They are. It's the leadership groups of the GOP. So the county, what I've encountered from some of the county groups, they still have fight in them because they're elected by the body of the GOP. But the state level parties, they're supposed to lead the charge. And what I'm seeing and hearing from multiple people in different states is that the state leadership for most states is not willing to go and fight back against what's happening in our cities. They've become so conditioned to that just not being an option that they don't even strategize for it. They don't hope for it. They don't recruit for it. So if we're talking about taking inner cities at this point, there's no reason why a candidate like myself should not be an easy yes, for the state party. And they shouldn't deploy volunteers and canvassing and all of that to help to take this district back. But what we see is that Republicans now only want to advocate for the easy wins, but there are no easy wins anymore. There are no easy wins for people on the right. So to continue to think that you can just work on the easy wins, you're having less and less of those opportunities. And we have to start chipping away at these districts the same way that Democrats chip away at Republican strongholds. They'll deploy entire programs where they are working on turning red areas purple. They'll have a 10-year objective for how they take a state or a district. They don't care if it's going to be a long game. They'll pursue the long game. And I think we have to get much more strategic and also, elect better leadership for our state parties so they can set the tone for the entire state.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to say I totally agree. I think you're spot on with all this. And just a little personal experience as someone who's grown up in Central Illinois my whole life. It's easy for us Republicans to blame Chicago and blame the Democrats for the problems we see even downstate our high taxes and whatnot. But then when you look at the Republican ground game, like you were talking about, it's like non-existent in the city. There's no really strong candidates or strong races. We just let the incumbent Democrats continue to take their seats back and then run our state. So we're not going to really see change, like you said, until we try to get some fight back in the cities.
I totally agree. And the biggest thing that we have to see from state parties across the nation is we have to register and get more Republicans basically identified. Even in states where you don't officially register as a Republican, there should still be a outreach effort to get people registered to vote and make sure that they are going to be heavily leaning towards the Republican Party. The Democrats always have registration initiatives running all throughout different states. That is a constant goal because you have to recruit new voters. And I think that the biggest mistake of the Republican Party is that they wait for people to mature into the Republican Party. Democrats recruit you in and basically they onboard you, indoctrinate you, and get you as young as possible. That's why they're on college campuses so aggressively. But for Republicans, they wait for you to have a kid and get married to then become a Republican. And by that time, you've, voted for some really crazy things. And you've spent a lot of your life advocating for something that didn't do anything good for you. So we have to get much more aggressive with our recruitment efforts.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's also something like Charlie Kirk was getting at, that the Republicans, didn't go after or have a ground game for the young voters like you said the Democrats do. So totally agree with what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think you made a great point, and I'm going to speak a little bit about this in my claim. But I think that's just a generational gap that we're seeing too, and the difference between what the Republican Party is as we go into this next era without the president being on the ballot in 28. And, I work a lot with our state party leaders. I work a lot with our county party leaders. I'm a county party youth chair. I'm a district officer. I know the party apparatus, and this is a huge issue, is this apathy. I have a mantra: apathy without, ideas without action is just apathy.
Yes.
And everyone wants to talk about what we should or should not be doing. Everyone wants to be morally correct, but nobody wants to go out there and do the hard things like knocking doors, talking to voters, and getting people registered. And that's what I think our generation and the newer era of this party are going to have to take into consideration. And I want to shout out Scott Pressler. He's doing a great job of that. And we need to take a page from his book and continue to do that around the country, including here in Michigan, which is a battleground state.
Yes.
And according to our Secretary of State, 100% of adults are registered to vote here. So, we're pretty good.
That's tremendous, actually. But no, I definitely agree. I think that what we see right now too is that people want to have a perfect plan as opposed to perfecting while being in action. And I think that there's something to be said about being brave and bold enough to perfect your method as you go. It's okay for you to be at 70% perfection and then progress to 75 while you're doing the work. We spend too much time in ideation, and ideation is where you just lose time. You lose way too much time. And in this case, we're losing too many elections while we're ideating on how to have a big comeback as the Republican Party. You have to just get up and do it at this point.
100%. And I think that this is where Charlie and even Donald Trump have done a really good job of breathing courage back into our party and into our grassroots. What we are lacking in leadership levels is courage.
Yes.
And Charlie did a great job of that, is going out courageously. He didn't have all the answers, and he would admit that. But he went to college campuses courageously and met people where they were at and brought them in. And that's what we need to continue to do as we go into the next era.
No, I totally agree. And I think that's why I spoke to the whole warrior spirit. I think that the forefathers of the Republican Party were willing to die for it. And I know that that's a heavy topic, and it's like, oh, it's just politics, but it's not just politics. Politics controls everything about our way of life here in America. And I think that if we don't raise up more people who do have a Charlie Kirk spirit, who are willing to lay down their life, I think that's why we also need to go back to almost like a mandatory military service sometimes, because we don't have enough brave people in our culture. People are too attached, and this might sound weird, but a lot of people are way too attached to to their life, and they don't have enough things they're willing to die for. Like, I'm willing to die for my children. I'm willing to lay my life down for, for things that are very important for my faith. I'm willing to, even with this race, I've had death threats with this race, and I'm not going to shut up because somebody said something that's intimidating. If I can't stand up for something as simple as this, then I definitely can't stand up to somebody saying they're going to behead me for Christ. So I think that it's just a great way to practice for, if we happen to be here, during an aggressive time for Christianity. If you can't stand up for this, you're not going to be able to stand up for much. And people have to start getting much more comfortable with putting it all on the line.
Yeah, well, two things on that, and I very much so agree, is the rise of social media has given Gen Z a loss of purpose. And I think that is the systemic consequence of what we're seeing. And secondly, back to the first thing is our party's first president was Abe Lincoln. Okay, he started the Civil War against his better judgment because he knew it was morally correct. And I don't think you can't tell me he did that because he knew it was going to be a good time or easy. No. He did it because he had the courage and the forethought to know that this is the right thing to do, and the country needs to head in this direction. And we need to take a page from Abe Lincoln and get that courage back into our party.
Yeah, and I actually agree with what Jaden was saying. Like, people ask me all the time how I feel about this race, and to be honest, I do wish more men were stepping up. I think that it's really, even as I look throughout the party right now, it's a lot of women running for office because they really had to say, well, who else is going to do it? Because there's not enough men willing to run, and that is a catastrophic failure in the party, to the point where women who are like, I'm still in my childbearing years, I have young children, but I was the person who was willing to take up this fight and really truly give it all that I have. I wake up and fight for this every single day. And I think that we do have a fundamental breakdown in society where we don't have more men who say, I'm taking up, I'm taking this fight up, and I'm going to give it all that I have, and I'm going to risk, I have a business and I'm willing to risk some of that. I'm willing to risk exposure in order to fight for liberty for the people of my state, district, or what have you. Like, we need to, like I said, we have to raise more valiant men, because right now we're pushing women well outside of, I do believe in gender roles. Like, we're pushing women well outside of gender roles. And like I said, women, we are definitely, like I said, I'm going to take up this fight, but my hope is that this inspires more people to take up this fight. And because I do believe in term limits, I want to see more people who are ready to valiantly fight to continue to lead a district like CD1 well, after my term is done, because I believe, like I said, I believe in term limits. So that's just my mindset on that.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit extra too, being in Michigan, we are a battleground state, and we've seen the lack of young, inspiring, quality candidates. And that's a problem due to the fact that we have not gone out again and recruited and met people where they're at and brought people into the party. We would not be having issues where we don't have people stepping up for roles that we need. County boards, local boards, these are where decisions that affect you personally are made. Like your taxes, the roads, your schools, these are local issues. And if we don't have people stepping up to run for those positions, it's not a surprise what we're seeing. Here in Kalamazoo, we just had a millage pass for free childcare. You know, I don't think that I'm going to go and talk to my neighbor and they're going to agree with that. They're probably not. But we don't have the quality candidates to run for these positions to make sure that we are keeping those things off the ballot, because they're not good for taxpayers. They're not good for American citizens.
Well, and I think that even getting really good at explaining, because here's the thing, this is a little bit off topic. When Democrats present something like free childcare, it pushes people's back up against the wall, because in order to argue against it, you have to look anti-woman and anti-family unit. But when you really start to break down what does free childcare mean and what are the unintended implications of providing free childcare, it is automatically going to create an environment where childcare quality is going to decrease. Anything that is free is going to be lesser quality because you have to provide it to more people and you're not making any money off of it. Being able to generate a revenue from something keeps a service higher quality. It keeps the marketplace for that service much more accountable. When something is free, it's not, the value just gets sucked out of it. And when we're talking about something as important as childcare, making that free is dangerous. The same way making healthcare free is a dangerous concept. So that's something that we have to get better at explaining those things so Republicans feel more confident standing up against them. And also we break down the Democrats, kind of feckless attempts to make themselves seem like the party of the people.
100%. Here in Michigan, we have Abdul Al-Sayed running, and his main thing is Medicare for all. And yet he got caught on an interview saying, we're going to have to raise your taxes. And that is the reality of it, is nothing is ever free when it's funded by the government. Because where does the government get its money? It gets it from you, the American people.
Yep.
And so it lowers these quality standards for businesses to go out and look at Minnesota. Look at Canada's healthcare system. These are tried and true systems that have failed in the past. We know they fail. And now that they're coming back, it's no wonder,
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah. That's really good. All right, we're going to vote. It was just fun to sit back and watch that conversation. That was really, really fun to watch. All right, Dayne, scale of 1 to 5, agree, disagree, and why with Christian's claim. Dayne, you can cast your vote whenever. It might be lagging like crazy.
I think so.
All right. Well, either way, I'll go first then. That's fine. I give you a 5. 1, I mean, maybe I'm more biased, but I've, helped out with everything you've been doing. But no, I totally agree. We need to help restore these big cities that have become safe houses for some pretty bad policy for some time. So yeah, I completely agree. I give you a full 5. Dayne, hopefully your internet's working. What do you give her on a scale of 1 to 5?
He might not be able to hear you right now.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm having some technical issues. I can't hear you, Jacob, but I can hear you, Christian.
Oh, he said, what do you give the argument of 1 through on a scale of 1 through 5? Mm-hmm.
5, obviously. I agreed with a lot of what you said, and it's issues that I've been dealing with here in Michigan, and we're going to continue to deal with until we step up and have the courage, like Charlie, to actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Muted. Oh, you're muted, Logan.
I'll go ahead. I'll give it a 5. I've seen it within, Fort Wayne. We have it all. We have a 6-3 Republican council, but we still have a Democrat mayor, and she is the DEI, the Kamala Harris of Fort Wayne, just the way she was selected. And then Indianapolis, I see it all the time, is they're running one seat. They have all these seats up, and they decided that they're just going to go for the prosecutor's office. And the Republican Party is not doing much in these areas. They're not trying to win the actual battleground. They want to go into the easy positions, tout some candidates, and get the business owners to donate a bunch of money rather than actually trying to win in Chicago and Indianapolis and all over the nation.
I give it a 5. I think you're spot on with everything you said, how Republicans have, retreated from the cities. And props to you, Christian, for going out there, doing the hard thing and running a campaign in, a very deep blue district that needs a strong candidate like you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I give it a 5 as well. I have no pushback at all. And not really much to add either. I think everybody gave some really good perspectives, and I think you did a great job, Christian, backing that up. And props to you for doing the work that a lot of, again, like you said, godly men refuse to do for some reason. I agree with you. It's like, we're the men, So Yeah, TPSA currently is doing the thing called Fly the Flag initiative, where they're trying to get a bunch of people registered to vote, or at least check their registration. And so like that's like a huge thing that Erica's working on right now. And then of course TPSA Action, they're doing their thing with actual, they're the C4 of Turning Point, so they're more political. And so it's really cool to see. Right now there's like a coalition being built right now, the best that you can, because right now there's so much divisiveness in the party and in the movement as a whole. But we're trying where we can. So and of course, Christian, you're a big part of that. So yeah, I give it a 5.
All righty.
Thank you.
Great job, Christian. Way to present your case well. I'm going to welcome none other than Dayne Webb back to stage, even though he was just on stage for about 10 minutes there. I don't know if he can hear me or not. Maybe he can. Maybe he can't. That's okay. Dayne is a district officer for Michigan Republicans, and then also the founder of the Kalamazoo Young Conservatives as well. So Dayne is going to make his case, and make sure you unmute yourself when you get the chance, but the floor is yours.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Yeah, well, my claim kind of goes back off the other topic we were talking about, is the conservative movement needs less influencers and more organizers. We have done a great job, and Charlie has done an amazing job of inspiring more young people to get involved in terms of on social media, like this podcast, becoming influencers. And I think that's great. And a part of our movement needed that. But again, like Christian was saying, we are having a deficit of quality candidates, and we're not getting the amount of organizers we need to be able to win these races and take back these local organizations, which is where it all starts. We have a bottom up system, and the decisions that the president is making, yeah, they're going to affect you, but not till the later half. Our local boards are what affects you now. And so we need to make sure that we're not only putting an emphasis on our influencers and getting our message out there as conservatives, but also making sure that we have those quality organizers who can do the work on the back end, the action part of the ideas, and making sure that we're going out and working and talking to voters and getting and winning elections.
All right, guys, our next guest is Logan Hammond. Logan is the CEO of Grassroots Action and a TPUSA president. Am I correct? Is that true?
Yes.
Where are you president at?
The Club America, so high school, the county activism hub in the Fort Wayne area.
Awesome, man. Well, the floor is yours. Hopefully your Wi-Fi and your audio works out just fine.
So my take is that on the right, we spend more time eating our own than we do attacking the left. I say that because I see time and time again that conservatives use their platform more and more to attack each other before they even get to the left. We look at the Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. And Candace Owens, more times than not, will attack Republicans and Turning Point and our side before she ever attacks the left. And Ben Shapiro spends episodes dedicated to going after the president, going after the vice president, going after more members of the cabinet, influencers, saying that if you don't denounce all of these people, you're not a real conservative. And it's like we're losing the fight. I get so upset because I watch what's going on in this social media atmosphere, and Trump says the wrong word, or he'll even use the Lord's name in vain, and an entire section of the party who agrees with him on 99% of the issues will go and just instantly depart, and they'll go on social media and they'll rant about how much they hate Trump and how he's not a true Christian, but they're losing the point, and then they go and basically hand the fight over to the radical left.
So I think that this happens because on the right, obviously, you have more Christians, and with Christians being much more aware of morality and of just like this level of decorum that's expected from us, I think that then people on the right try to make sure they're holding everybody to this litmus test. And there's this expectation of purity and perfection on the right that's just not realistic. People are not going to get it right every single time with every stance or with every message or any of those things. And what you see on the Democratic side is that they don't have this expectation of perfection or purity. They will work with what they have, and they will stay united on the outside for outside appearances as much as possible. But on the right, people quickly fall into so many different factions, which is what weakens our overall movement, because there is no cohesion or ability to kind of see what's really important. The only things I'm willing to kind of break ranks with somebody on is the pro-life situation. Like, I have a issue with some of the candidates right now who are, running in the state, because I think the pro-life issue is very important for any state level leader. But there's key things that I'm going to, be willing to kind of really hold you to account for. But the way that people scrutinize Trump, it doesn't make sense. And any person who actually went into voting for Trump with an open mind, if you actually really sat down with that decision, you should not be shocked by him getting some wording, just doing some crazy things with his wording or saying some wild things. We didn't elect him because he was the perfect example of a Christian. We elected him because he had enough grit to actually stand up for Christianity, even if he does not overall, identify as a Christian. He's brave enough to stand up for things that are important. And right now, a lot of people who say they are Christians are not brave enough to stand up for those things. So I went into voting for Trump based off of understanding that he's going to curse sometimes. He's not going to understand everything about Christianity, understanding that he's going to approach most things from a business sense of things. I went into the vote with that because I understood that he would still be able to execute on about 80 to 85% of the things that are most important to me. And I think that anybody who makes truly analytical decisions, they would think of it that way. But a lot of people are just very emotional and led by their emotions.
Yeah, and Trump was not my first choice in the primary. You can go back. I still have the post up where I criticized Trump for his stances on, LGBTQ marriage, on his stances when it comes to gun rights, on his stances when it comes to life. But at the end of the day, I am a party guy. I believe we live in a better society because of the two-party system. And you can either take who your coalition has decided as the candidate, or you can take who your enemies have decided as the candidate. I don't like calling fellow Americans enemies, but when they are inviting Islam into our country, they are murdering us for having different political opinions, and they're wishing death to America. They are, in fact, our enemies. And sometimes, I don't always believe in the greater of two evils, but in some cases, we do have to choose the greater of two evils.
Yeah, so I'm going to push back a little bit. I agree generally with the claim that right now we're doing more infighting on the right than in the left, but I mean, I think there's a lot of infighting. First of all, within the left, I think actually if you just disagree with the most smallest thing, they will call you every name in the book. That has been my experience. Even when I was leaning left on my political views, I didn't become a conservative until 2021. I was pushed over to the right. And at that time, bro, maybe 60% of my beliefs were liberal, still leftist. And I was still welcomed as a person into the Republican Party, into the conservative movement as a whole. And they loved me, man. They ate me up because I was new, first of all. But I feel like there's a lot more welcoming. Like, I think you can have a lot more diverse beliefs and identify as conservative and Republican than you can as a leftist. Like, I feel like you cannot be, like, for example, like a pro-life leftist. Like, I think they will definitely tie you up somewhere and do something crazy to you. I don't think you can be a anti-LGBTQ movement leftist necessarily. Like, I think they will tie you up and do something to you. But if you identify as a pro-choice, pro-LGBTQ, log cabin Republican, no one on the right is really going to push back. Really, not. I haven't really seen it. And then the other thing too, I do think the infighting right now that's happening in the Republican Party is bad. I think we're infighting about the wrong stuff. And you brought it up,
Mhm.
Candace Owens and stuff like that. I think that type is bad. I think the the magnifying glass on the whole Israel issue, I think you can argue it's an issue, but it's not. I just don't think it's important at all. It's not even my top 10 of things that I'm even worried about. Like top 15, maybe. Like maybe. I don't even think it's worth dividing over at all when it comes to the right wing. And I think that's like the biggest thing that's dividing us right now. And this is the last thing I'll say, but I do think there are things worth dividing over. And you said two of them.
Mhm.
You said abortion and you said LGBTQ. I think these two things are the biggest cultural and political and spiritual issues of our time. And I do not think supporting abortion, if you're a candidate, or supporting the LGBTQ makes you a candidate that I'm going to vote for or support. And so I was like you, where I was very critical of Trump at that time because, there were other candidates that were just better on those issues and other issues, of course. But when it's time to come together, I agree with you. We should. But I do think there are issues that we should be dividing over, So anyway, I mostly agree with you, especially right now. But as a whole, maybe there's some disagreement there.
If you want to respond, you can.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we tend to not take our problems to the ballot and to the election as we should, and we want to spend more time over social media fighting about it than we do in elections. Here in Indiana, we had a problematic Secretary of State. He was a Republican, and we kind of had to we put him in because we gave him a chance, but halfway through his 8 years, at the end of his first term, we said, well, we don't like you. So we found a better candidate and we ran against him. And it was, we had infighting for about 6 weeks, but we came out the other side. And now everybody is kind of team, we vote Republican in the fall.
Yeah, I think that I would push back just a hair. Well, one, for a couple of reasons. One, because, yes, I think what Candace Owens is doing is completely evil on a lot of levels. However, if nobody is going to call her out, then she's just going to keep doing it anyway, clearly, because a lot of people have called her out at this point, and she's just said whatever she wants. So that doesn't really matter, I guess. I think the infighting is still bad. But yeah, I think that at some point, I have no problem. I literally released a full hour and 15-minute video on the fact that Candace Owens what she's doing is incredibly evil and in large part stupid in a lot of ways. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I do think that, yes, I would agree with you, but also I think that as somebody who wants to speak truth, I think you also have to stand up for that. Okay. The only other thing I'll say about this, which I really do agree with Jaden on a lot of what he said. And I do agree with you. We do need to stop infighting over some really small scale issues, and understand that, especially within the Republican Party. I think conservative and Republican is very different, and I think it's important to separate that. And the reason is because there are plenty of Republicans that I would not consider conservative. And so on a Republican scale, yes, I think we need to stop the infighting. On a conservative scale, I don't think you can be conservative if, once again, you are very pro-choice, if you are not pro-biblical marriage. And I'm actually going to talk about that later. But yeah, I think that it depends. I think it's hard to say that all the infighting is always bad, where I think in some situations I would agree with you for the most part, but in some situations I think there are things that are worth fighting over.
I think infighting, there are sometimes benefits to infighting, but we can't let that take priority over fighting the left, which we have with people like Nick Fuentes coming out and saying that he's going to vote Democrat in the midterms and encouraging his supporters to do such. And then, the anti-Vance people saying that if Vance is the nominee, they will not vote in the Republican primary. People like the Ben Shapiro crowd have said that. I think that's ridiculous.
And I agree with you. That actually leads me into my point. So I know Jaden was saying he pushes back, but I think that when we talk about this topic, you have to break it out into how welcoming and open-minded are we for Republican voters versus how welcoming and open-minded are we for candidates. And as a person who went from being a voter to a candidate, the way people become extremely closed-minded and will try to instantly find a way to label you as a rhino. I have not been labeled as a rhino because people know that I wouldn't say I'm far right, but I'm like closer to being,
so then
far
people
right.
claim you're too, people claim you probably are called too far right. They probably say you need to be more moderate.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
That's the thing, is that we hold leaders in the Republican Party to this constant, it's like this constant scale. Oh, you gained 2 points, you lost 3 points. We're constantly falling in and out of love with leadership. But like I said, to Jaden's point, anybody can become a Republican voter. We'll welcome anybody as a Republican voter. But when it comes to people that we want to support to actually run for office, who are currently in office, we will break ranks with them so quick. And it really is, it's one of the weirdest phenomena to watch, because you didn't see people on the left berating, Biden. I talked to people in real life who would just say, oh, he's just an older guy. And it's, we need to give him grace. And Republican voters would never, they would never really say, like, some of them are still, like if they see Trump do something, they'll try to explain it. But a lot of people will quickly judge him quite harshly for things that he does. And I think that we are very harsh on Republican leadership.
And those same Republicans, if you even talk about some of them who are super Trump, if you even talk about criticizing Trump or say that Trump is wrong, they're going to come at you and they say, no, you're not playing the 50D chess. Trump is playing the 50D chess. He's actually completely on our side. He's supporting gay marriage to get rid of it. He's supporting abortion to get rid of it. And you sit down and you say, can we just agree that we're not always going to agree with the leaders on the right? And we got to come under 70% rather than losing our minds over the 5% we disagree on.
The thing I remind people is that we're all people, we're all flawed. That's why Jesus had to come and die for us, because we were destined to fail. So I think that it's just so futile to keep trying to figure out who's perfect enough, because all of us will fall short. We will disappoint each other. We will fall short of the expectation, because that's just who we are as a creation. So we have to really remind ourselves of what the Bible says, and it tells us that we're going to fail at being perfect. People seem to forget that all the time.
All right, Christian, you can start off our voting scale of 1 to 5. What do you give it?
I give it a 5, because I think that this is why we see so much of a disjointed movement, is because people who are key components of the Republican movement, like precinct committeemen, all of these leaders, if they don't like a leader who's currently above them, they'll just stop doing the work. And you can't keep having people stop doing the work because they currently aren't in love with the movement. We need more continuity, and we need people who will stand firm because they're committed to the mission, not the leader who's above them. So we need more mission-oriented people who aren't fickle. So I agree with his argument.
I give it a 5 as well. I totally agree. I think, we definitely have to be unified going forward as a party, especially with the challenges we are facing ahead with the left. And, it's easy to criticize. And like you said, it's easy to beat people in office down, but it's hard to actually go and do the hard thing and, fight for these values that we kind of all agree on.
Yeah, I'll give you a 5 too. I mean, I agree. Here in Michigan, we've had a lot of infighting in the past.
Oh, he cut out again.
Yeah, he's gone. Okay, so I'm gonna go. I'm somewhere between a 2 and a 3. I'm gonna give you a 3. I think you bring up a lot of good points. I would agree on a lot of the stuff. I'm gonna take Dayne's absolutely cooked screen off. I'm gonna give you a 3 just because I think that I agree with you for the most part, but I think there's a couple of situations where I think it's important that we do stand up for truth, even if that does cause some division. But I would agree. I think we need to focus our fighting and the truth that we do fight for more towards those who oppose the big picture that we all support at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll give it like a 3.5. I'm between like a 3 and a 4. Am I allowed to do that, Jacob? I assume, right? Maybe.
Yeah, I got my fat and fancy iPhone calculator. You should be good.
Good. Yeah, I'll give it like a 3.5. I feel like a 3 for me is too low because I definitely agree with you a lot more than a 3. But I also don't think I can say a 4 because then I'm like too close. But yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say I wanted to have a take that not everybody was gonna agree on. I wanted some dissension.
Yeah, me too. I thought mine would be like, but I guess no. But yeah, Logan, I think you did a good job for the argument. I think you did a pretty good job though. And again, we mostly agree. It's just like those little things. And yeah, I think the way that we currently are right now, I think you're mostly right. But I don't think that's true, like generally. But again, I already said that earlier. So
Yeah.
Good job though.
Alrighty, guys, I'm going to finish off the night with my claim. I'm not going to introduce myself because that would be strange if you don't know who I am at this point. Well, I don't really know why you're watching the show. My claim tonight, let me start my timer so I don't go over time. But my claim tonight is that if churches become more biblical, then they will become more political. And when that happens, the culture will start to change. Okay, what do I mean by that? If churches become more biblical, you might ask me, how do churches become more biblical? Well, when only 37% of pastors in America hold a true biblical worldview, and that study's done by George Barna, then you don't have biblical churches. When the place that is supposed to be Bible-centered doesn't have people preaching from the pulpit who believe the Bible, then no Bible is going to outflow from that. Okay, so that's the first part. So if churches become more biblical, then they will become more political. What does that mean? Okay, then they will be unafraid to speak into these issues that we have going on in our country, because a lot of these issues are in fact biblical. Abortion, biblical issue. The nuclear family, biblical issue. Just being patriotic, for an example, also biblical issue. You could make that argument. So that's part of it. And when that happens, then the culture will start to change. What do I mean by that? The church is supposed to be the beacon for truth in our culture. If you don't have churches who understand what the truth is, and that is Jesus, who is the Word incarnate, if you don't have Bible-believing churches with Bible-believing pastors, then you're not going to push truth into the culture. So that's my claim. Raise your hand if you would like to add. Christian, come first.
Man, I love that. I love that because I know that people are asking me to legislate morality back into society. And that is not the space that Congress is supposed to fill in society. We cannot write a bill that creates more Black dads. There's no bill that all of a sudden creates more Black fathers. There's no bill that makes, women inside of different areas of the community less likely to engage in premarital sex. There is no bill that does that. But what does do that? Church does that, and having that root and foundation inside of a biblical church that will convict you sometimes. I think this leads to one thing I'll say before I get off is that we are so allergic to conviction in this society, and we hate feeling convicted that's why so many people do not have refinement anymore. We're not being refined. Conviction is designed to refine you and to truly evolve you into who you're supposed to be. And that is why people hate biblical churches, because biblical churches will hold you to a standard, and it's a biblical standard. You will feel uncomfortable if you have a child before you're married, and that is because it's biblical. So I think that we do need to get back to, like you said, having those biblical churches. And I 100%, I literally love this stance, and I agree with your claim totally.
Yeah, and the reason I really agree with what you said is because churches should hold your feet to the fire on truth. And I think a lot of what you're seeing is the churches that are super overgrown, these massive churches that are all hype and no truth, are really, really popular because they aren't doing that. And there's no real truth. It's a 10-point lesson on how to live a better life. It's a 5-point lesson on how to have a better marriage. And there's no actual legitimate conviction, truth, or a huge part of what John the Baptist's ministry was. There's no genuine repentance going on in these churches. And if you just go to church to feel good about yourself, I mean, why wouldn't you go, to be honest?
Man, you're so correct. You're so correct. And I think that it kind of just loops back to so many other things we talked about on this, which is what is the role of the man in society and also in his household? And then conversely, what's the role of a woman inside of her household and also in society? And because we're no longer, the thing that set the tone for that was the Bible. The Bible sets the tone for that. But so many people do not know the Bible, and they're going to church and just getting an empowerment talk. they're going to church and hearing somebody give them a quick self-help chit chat, and they leave out feeling so good, and all of the dysfunction they walked in with is the same dysfunction that they walk out with. And church is supposed to put a little bit of the belt to the butt, and it's supposed to lead you back to God over and over, so that you seek him while you're being refined, because it's not all on us to refine ourselves. It's on us to lean on Christ so he can grow us and evolve us into who we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think I totally agree with it. A bit of a question. What would you say to maybe some of the Christians, and I know there's pastors out there who would say, we want to just be biblical. We don't want to get political. We don't want to get divisive. And I think it's a little bit of that seeker-sensitive gospel you were talking about earlier. But what would you say to them to get them to kind of preach the word with boldness, really?
I mean, it's funny you said seeker sensitive. I claim that you are a very smart person. A lot of people understand that there's a lot of weight tied to that. I appreciate that terminology. But no, I think there's a couple pieces of this. One, you said that we're divisive, and I think that there's a lot of churches that divisiveness is their biggest heresy. We got to stay away from being divisive. We got to be welcoming to all. We got to be accepting of everybody. And I think that's terrible. I think that is the worst thing for the church, because Jesus himself said, I'm coming here and I'm going to set brother from brother and father from son and mother from son. That's because the truth does divide. Your faith in Jesus is unfortunately going to divide you and separate you from your faith who doesn't. Now, we can still be loving and should be loving. We're called to be loving of our enemies. However, if you only see your enemy as an enemy instead of your mission field, that's where we're going to have a little bit of a problem. Okay. So I think that's the first part that I would push back on, the divisiveness issue. Okay. Secondly, churches that don't want to become political. Well, what does it mean to be political? I don't need you from the pulpit telling me who to vote for on Sunday morning. That's not what I mean. What I want you to do is to preach the word of God expositionally. If you go through verse by verse and don't skip over uncomfortable topics, then a lot of these things that are going on in our culture, like government socialism or abortion or what the bill that got passed earlier in Illinois that actually me and you recorded an episode about, where you allow for underage women to get all types of reproductive health care without any consent from their parents. When you start to take parenthood out of society, when you start to take the sanctity of life out of society, when you start to take what marriage really means out of society, then you just lose kind of a lot of things that this country was built on and that the founding fathers had in mind.
Yeah, that's great. I think when it comes to even that change and seeing it in the culture, to see political change, and ultimately these issues aren't all just cultural or political. They're theological, like you were talking about, abortion, homosexuality. These are moral issues in the Bible. But to see change, I think there's a quote, I won't say it perfectly, I don't remember it exact, from John Adams saying, before the American Revolution happened, the real revolution started in the hearts and minds of people during the Great Awakening, when the preachers got them to repent and realize their sin, and they turned to Christ. And then that's what ended up turning the culture in the direction that led to the founding of this nation.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because John Adams then goes on to say, our Constitution was written for a moral and religious people. So you can see that the people needed to become that, and then in order to start what would lead to America. Very interesting point.
Man, he stole my fire, because I was going to bring up the first Great Awakening behind. Honestly, if you ask me, that was led by, I don't know if you guys have seen A Great Awakening, the movie. That just... Bro, I cried, bro. It was like,
I did too. I cried at theater
of all time.
I agree.
It's my favorite movie of all time, because I'm a street preacher, and obviously, why am I blanking on his name right now?
George Whitefield.
George Whitefield was a street preacher. He got kicked out of the Church of England because he preached holiness, he preached repentance, he preached the truth, and these churches who were dead, he said, awake, O sleeper. That was his biggest thing. Awake, O sleeper. Right now, we have a bunch of dead churches in this country, and people need to wake up, right? People are kind of just dead zombies. They're going to their churches, and they're just sitting there and like zombies. They get their fill for an hour, and they leave, and they go home, and they're sinners on Monday through Saturday, right? And so that's the problem in this country. I want to talk about the second Great Awakening that we had in this country, too, led by Charles Finney, who spoke out against things like chattel slavery. and he preached holiness, repentance. That's what we need, is a third great awakening. And I want to read this Bible verse that ironically President Trump read at the museum, or for the Museum of the Bible. It was the America Read the Bible project, where you had leaders across the country read the Bible verse by verse for 7 days straight, from Genesis to Revelation. I was blessed to be able to read, I believe I read Psalm 69 through 72. President Trump read this verse in the White House. He said, "If my people are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, and I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land." That is how we make this country great again. It's by repentance and turning from our sin and turning towards God. And like you said, Jacob, it is, and like you said, who was it that just spoke? I'm sorry, I forgot. I have a memory problem, man. I feel like Tyler.
Yeah, it's Tyler.
Like you and Tyler just said, it's about going to church, and it's about repenting from your sin and turning towards God. And it's odd to me that people think that you can have a good system, a good country, without a moral and religious people. And we see the consequences of that right now throughout the world, and we've seen it through history. And if God is going to bless this nation, we must turn away from our sin. It's funny, too, I also brought up earlier in my argument, I talked about child sacrifice and how God will not even hear the prayers of a nation that is practicing child sacrifice. He says that their prayers does not go above their head. He says, "I will remember your righteousness no longer," right? This is the problem in this nation, that we think that we have a good constitution. We have all the things that we need to run a government. It doesn't stop there. We have to be always relying on God. And I believe that the reason why this nation is still standing is from the prayers of the church, the prayers of those who are born again. Lord, give this nation one more day. Lord, turn this nation back to you. And the moment that happens, the moment that we have a third great awakening, is the moment that this country be great again. But until then, I believe we're under the condemnation of God right now. I believe God has turned his face away from America, but he can turn back to America if we will, like it says in 2 Chronicles 7:14, if we would turn from our wicked way, if we would seek his face and pray and humble ourselves. So I totally agree, Jacob, with you. That's going to start with the church. That's going to start with true repentance being preached, just like George Whitefield, just like Charles Finney, just like the great preachers before. We need those men, like Logan was talking about earlier. We need those men to step up in the pulpit and in our culture. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, that's really good. I think there's a couple of things I want to touch on real quick, and then Logan, I'll let you go, and then Christian, I'll let you say one thing, and then I'll respond to both. But one of the things that I think was interesting that you brought up was that it doesn't just stop with the Constitution. It doesn't just stop with having a moral and religious people, which is, I would say, that's not at all how I would describe the people in America right now, unfortunately. But what's interesting is in that movie, A Great Awakening, is there's a scene where Ben Franklin gives a speech at the Constitutional Convention, and he literally says that, "Have we forgotten not to apply humbly to the Father of lights to illuminate our understanding?" Basically saying, how can we have this heavy of discussion and have topics and decisions to make that are this important and simply not even pray? So yes, I totally agree with you. I would argue that the first Great Awakening was infinitely more biblical than the second. However, that would be an entire theological debate that we would have to have for another time. But Logan, go ahead.
So actually, I like the discussion on the Great Awakening because my friend, her parents worked on the movie. So
no way, that's crazy.
Yeah, she's a chapter president in Indiana as well.
You got to get her on the show. You have to send me her contact after.
I will. She has some hot takes that would go on this show. Very hot takes. But what I was going to say was one of my favorite founding fathers is Benjamin Rush. He's actually the founder of public education, which is so funny for a homeschooler to say, is that my favorite founding father founded public education. And it's because in one of his letters, he was talking to, after his amendment failed at the Constitutional Convention, he went state by state, establishing an amendment in their constitution, entitling every boy and girl that they would be insured a education. And that education was supposed to be a moral and civic education. And he said in a letter, he said, I would rather that my sons and daughters be taught the beliefs of the Islamic Brotherhood over a secular education. He thought that a secular education was no education at all. Because if you had no bounds to your life, how would you go about your life? You know, how would you live as a good citizen if you don't know what good means? But he said, I prefer the New Testament because our founders from the start knew that our nation could only survive freedom. When the Bible says that wherever the Lord is, there is freedom, they're being literal. Because if we do not have the Lord and we have no laws, we have total insanity. We have people out on the streets killing each other. But if we don't have the Lord and we decide to replace the Lord with laws, the laws get so heavy and burdensome that there is no freedom. The only freedom is within the Lord, and biblical citizenship in modern day America by Patriot Academy and Wall Builders is an incredible program. Every Christian, every patriot should go through that program. So that's just one I wanted to add. I completely agree.
Yeah. I think there's two things I want to say real quick, and then Christian, you can go. I got a poster right here that says freedom from sin, not freedom to sin. Okay. Freedom is not chaos. There's a difference. A lot of people think freedom just means do whatever the heck you want. That's not true. Freedom comes within having a clearly defined vision and a plan and a purpose for your life. Christian, go ahead.
I just want to bring up a point about the whole when Jaden said that he feels like God is turning his face away from America. I think that God is really like showing us how he feels about a lot of the things that are happening in Illinois, and bringing up the point that he had about child sacrifice. Right now, Illinois is about to close in on the top amount of tornadoes in a single year out of the entire U.S. We're at 200 confirmed tornadoes, and the top record is 245. We usually have 54 to 67 tornadoes in Illinois. And when we think about the way that Illinois has aggressively pursued the murdering of babies, and they've made it a cornerstone of all of these politicians have made it a cornerstone piece of policy. They are even when Kamala came here for her campaign, she brought an abortion bus. And I think that is something that we have to all it's like, even for people who don't believe in Jesus, it's like, there's so much evidence that, the state has gone in the wrong direction, and we have to fight to bring it back into alignment with what's correct, because the state can't continue to take the ramifications that are very much so happening to us, whether people want to acknowledge that Jesus is real or not.
Yeah. And it's funny because Pritzker said, I want to say it was pretty early on when he came to Illinois, was that he wanted to make Illinois, or maybe it was Chicago specifically, the abortion capital of America. Like, that's insane. That's terrible. But along with that, that's such an obvious reason of why so many people who are even moderates or even liberals wanted to vote for Trump instead of Kamala, because some of this stuff is actually insane. Like, what are we talking about? This isn't even just policy anymore. This is just basic human nature. And that's what's interesting about the founding fathers, is a lot of them believed in this idea of higher law, that whether or not you believed in God or Jesus or the Bible or were religious at all, that you still had some idea that I could look at you and you could look at me and be like, okay, if I murdered you out of cold blood, that would still be wrong. There are still some things that are set upon our hearts that no matter what we believe, we can understand that's wrong. No matter what you believe, you can understand that pedophilia is wrong. No matter what you believe, you can understand that child sacrifice is wrong. And the fact that we're starting to forget that, and that we're just so brainwashed. There's a reason that Charlie Kirk did the brainwash tour. It's because we genuinely are. And I think Gen Zers are the most susceptible to that.
Honestly, Gen Zers, there's another faction of I think that you all are going to be one of the generations that, because you're in Gen Z, I think you all are going to be one of the generations that become unapologetically for the Bible and unapologetically patriotic. I think that unfortunately boomers and millennials were some of the most complacent generations. A lot of millennials are starting to wake up, but there was a great deal of people who were in the boomer generation who they just really didn't have the amount of fight in them that we needed them to have to also steward us as millennials. And I think that, like I said, I'm very inspired when I encounter Gen Z creators and voters, because you all are, that something's just wrong. A lot is wrong in this nation, and you're not willing to stand by and let it stay that way. So I'm actually really encouraged by Gen Zers.
Well, I'm glad you think so. All right, we're gonna get to voting. Christian, you can start us off. Scale of 1 to 5.
I fundamentally agree. I wholeheartedly agree with your argument. We have to make Christ the center of what we're doing here in this nation, and we need to really center churches as a cornerstone, ecosystem inside of our nation in order to restore a lot of what makes America America.
Awesome.
Also totally agree. I give it a 5 out of 5. You know, if we want to see change in the culture and, you know, see some of these things that are so immoral change, it's got to change at the church level, and you need a courageous church to go out and preach the truth of the gospel.
My question, Tyler, is would you disagree with me? I am the president of this chapter that you're vice president. Would you disagree with me if you really wanted to?
No. No, I would.
Okay, good. All right. Logan, what do you think?
Get a 5. Absolutely agree. Just again, I would say it again. Biblical citizenship was the first class that I ever took going into politics and history. I was 12 years old. I've been involved since 2021. And, you know, that class really set the tone. And I've realized that more and more that we can't have a society that believes in freedom if we're not going to uphold biblical truth. Like, I ask people, how can you define, you know, what's moral life when we talk about life? And unless you have a moral framework to define life, then nothing really matters. And, you know, Joshua Hames, he has Reformation Red Pill. He just covered that, you know, the secular left can't define, well, secular can't define why it is wrong for two twin brothers to sleep with each other. They can't find a definition as to why. Because what is morally wrong about it? Well, you know, when I look at incest, I know that it's morally wrong because God wrote it on my heart, and he wrote it in the book and he wrote it in the Bible, his book, that it is morally wrong. And so I absolutely agree. 5 out of 5.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. I like Joshua Hames, shout out. Great podcast. Love what he does.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely rate this a 5 out of 5. I'm a street preacher myself. This is something that I believe is the way that we're going to change the culture. Voting is one thing, but changing the culture, changing the hearts and minds of people, I think that's another. Jesus never said, go out into all the nations and vote. He said, go out to all the nations and preach the gospel, right? And so I do believe that this is the way. Church is preaching the truth. And I appreciate you bringing that up, Jacob, and definitely agree with you.
I appreciate it, guys. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for being a part of the second ever part 2 of our debate series, the Save America debate series. I'm glad to have you guys on. There's some interesting topics tonight. I think it's interesting because I invite all these people on, and you have Christian, who's, you know, she's running for Congress, and then you got, you know, Jaden, he's a street preacher, and then Tyler and Logan and Dayne, although he's not with us anymore, unfortunately, virtually not with us. He's still very much alive. It sounded terrible. And we're all, you know, up and coming spokesperson for politics and for truth. So I think it's interesting to see that the diversity of opinion and what matters to each and every single one of us. So thank you guys for being on once again. It was a pleasure having you guys. All righty, guys. Well, that is going to wrap up our part 2 of the Save America debate series. Once again, you guys need to subscribe. You guys need to go to faithstrength.square.site to get your Jacob York Show shirts and all other patriotic and Christian apparel. But thank you guys once again for watching. One thing I will say is, as of recent, there's been more and more of you guys who've been reaching out over Instagram who not only want to be on the show, but two, want to have topics that you guys want me to cover, which is awesome. And I'm glad that we're starting to build a little bit of a following slowly but surely. But once again, these shows are on YouTube and Spotify. Share them with your parents, share them with your grandparents, share them with your friends, and then also suggest different topics you want us to cover, because I am open to any and all topics. We've talked about socialism. We've talked about Candace Owens. Me and my friend did a bunch of Christian hot takes that we reacted to. So we're open to just about everything. I'm excited for some episodes coming down the pipeline as well. I've got some cool people for you guys to meet. So thank you guys once again for watching, and we will see you guys next time.
It was never about Erica. It was never about in whatever way possible, we need Christian leaders who have a good understanding of the Bible, to have a good understanding of what's going on in our nation as well, and then be able to communicate that effectively to the youth at the same time.